The sun had dipped below the acacia trees hours ago, painting the vast canvas of the Serengeti in the inky black of a moonless night. John Miller, a seasoned conservationist who ran a small remote research outpost, knew this silence. He lived in it. It was the deep, rhythmic silence of a million unseen lives moving in the shadows, punctuated only by the distant, territorial roar of a mature male lion or the sudden, sharp yelp of a jackal. Tonight, however, the silence was broken, not by the routine sounds of the bush, but by something far more unsettling, a sound that spoke of pure, unadulterated fear and desperation. John was in his canvas tent, the soft glow of a kerosene lamp illuminating the worn pages of his journal. He was jotting down observations from the day, a herd of eland moving east, the unusual sighting of a black-backed vulture, when the sound first pierced the night. It was high-pitched, thin, and utterly heartbreaking. It was a cry, not the aggressive snarl of a predator, not the alarm call of a prey animal, but the desperate, continuous wail of a baby animal in dire distress. He paused his pen, holding his breath, listening to the vast emptiness swallow the noise. "Must be a hyena pup," he muttered to himself, trying to rationalize it away. He'd heard every sound the savannah had to offer in his 2 decades living here. He knew the difference between natural panic and existential despair. The sound came again, closer this time, and it was persistent. It was a cry of loss, of cold, of hunger. It was relentless, cutting through the thick velvet quiet of the African night like a shard of glass. John tried to ignore it, telling himself that nature must take its course, that intervention was often more dangerous and ultimately more harmful than simply letting the wild run its course. But the sound clung to the edges of his consciousness, scratching relentlessly at his deeply ingrained empathy, twisting the knot in his stomach tighter and tighter. He threw the journal down, the ink still wet on the page, the observation for the day unfinished. The cry was too distinct, too heartbreakingly familiar to ignore. He knew this sound. He had spent his life among these animals, and he could identify the timbre of their suffering. This was the unmistakable, gut-wrenching sound of a lion cub, barely weeks old, completely alone in the most unforgiving landscape on Earth. The clock on his small, fold-out table read just past 11 p.m. The air was turning sharply cold, the kind of dry, desert cold that sinks immediately into your bones despite the day's blistering heat. John pulled on a thick canvas jacket, laced his old leather boots tight, and grabbed his necessities for an emergency night expedition. A heavy-duty flashlight with a freshly charged battery, a thermos of lukewarm tea, and a sturdy length of rope, just in case. His heart felt heavy, burdened by the terrible knowledge of what that persistent cry meant. A lone, helpless cub in the darkness was not a possibility of tragedy. It was a certainty of death, whether by slow starvation, lethal exposure, or the swift, brutal jaws of a passing scavenger or predator. The cub would not last the night. He stepped out of the outpost. The night air was crisp, carrying the strong, earthy scent of dry grass, dust, and a subtle metallic hint of distant moisture. He swung the powerful beam of the flashlight toward the direction of the sound, a faint, pulsing echo coming from the direction of the dry riverbed, a mile or so away. He could hear the cub's frantic cries now, a repeated, rhythmic meow, meow, thin as glass, but shattering the profound peace of the night. It sounded utterly exhausted, its voice already strained and hoarse from hours of calling out to a mother who clearly wasn't coming back. John began his extremely careful walk, navigating solely by the sound and the faint outline of the distant rocky kopje where the cry seemed to originate. He moved slowly, deliberately, his senses on the highest alert. This was arguably the most dangerous time for a human to be moving on foot in the bush. Every deep shadow could be a charging leopard, every unexpected rustle in the grass a startled, angry Cape buffalo. He swept the flashlight beam methodically from side to side, looking for the telltale, unsettling gleam of reflective eyes that meant danger. The profound silence he had briefly broken rushed back in behind him, amplifying the sound of his own heavy boots crunching on the loose gravel and dry earth. As he got closer to the source, the distress in the cub's voice became almost unbearable, a physical presence in the air. It wasn't just crying anymore, it was pure, unadulterated panic. The sound now had an edge of raw hysteria that made John quicken his pace, momentarily ignoring the ingrained risks. He calculated that at this volume and strained tone, the cub had been crying for countless hours, perhaps since the very moment the sun had set. That meant it was already suffering from deep hunger, severe dehydration, and was likely hypothermic, a state no creature that small and vulnerable could possibly endure for much longer. He reached the edge of the riverbed, which was currently bone-dry and crisscrossed with dense, thorny shrubs and deep, sandy gullies. The cub's cries were directly ahead, muffled slightly, but clearly emanating from a cluster of thick, low-lying brush at the base of a massive, ancient fig tree. He stopped, holding his position rigidly, and turned off the powerful flashlight. He listened intently, straining his ears over the frantic little voice. The most immediate, terrifying thought was the lioness. He needed to be absolutely 100% certain the cub was alone. A mother lion, especially one guarding a distressed cub, would be ferociously protective, instinctively lethal, and impossible to see in this deep darkness. He waited for several long, agonizing minutes, the only sound the cub's desperate, continuous plea. He listened for any heavy, deliberate breathing, any soft, calculated footfall, any low, menacing growl of warning. There was nothing. Just the relentless, innocent, desperate cry of the baby. He switched the light back on, keeping the beam focused low and narrow. He crept forward, parting the dense, thorny branches with extreme care, pushing them aside slowly with the butt of his flashlight. And then he saw him. The cub was heartbreakingly tiny, perhaps 6 to 8 weeks old at most. His coat was still heavily spotted, soft and grey-brown, but it was badly matted with mud and dust. He was crouched in a small, cramped hollow between the massive, exposed roots of the old fig tree, his entire body shivering uncontrollably. The first thing John noted was relief. He wasn't trapped by a cruel metal snare, which was a common, awful sight. But something else was holding him. The cub was frantically batting with small, exhausted paws at a thicket of tangled thorn vines that seemed to have been deliberately woven, layered, or piled up around the opening of his tiny shelter. The cub, Leo, as John would later tenderly name him, looked up at the sudden intrusion of the bright light. His eyes, large and a deep, milky blue-gray, typical of very young cubs, were wide with terror, confusion, and utter exhaustion. He didn't snarl or hiss with baby aggression, the natural defense of a cub. Instead, he just let out a single, choked, desperate whimper and tried weakly to burrow himself deeper into the dust. The incredible energy required for the loud, piercing cry seemed to have suddenly vanished now that a large, intimidating presence, even a strange one, was near. John slowly sank to his knees in the dry earth, keeping his movements as deliberate and calm as possible. He spoke in a low, soothing voice, the kind of quiet, rhythmic cadence he would use for any frightened child. "It's all right, little one. I'm here now. I won't hurt you." He gently felt around the edge of the thorn branches and the wire beneath them. This was no simple, accidental, natural barrier. John's blood ran cold. Someone had used thick, sturdy wire and tightly interwoven thorny vines to secure the entrance to this hollow, effectively turning it into a temporary, cruel cage. The cub hadn't been naturally orphaned by a tragedy. He had been taken and then left. A cold, deep dread settled over John's soul. This wasn't the inevitable tragedy of nature. This was the calculated, deliberate cruelty of man. The true, terrifying reason for the cub's endless tears was beginning to take shape, and it was far more sinister than John had first imagined. The cub was dangerously thin, his tiny ribs showing prominently through his coat, and his sensitive paws were raw, scraped, and bleeding slightly from frantically trying to dig his way out of the prison. John slowly and carefully reached around the wire and thorns, moving with extreme patience to avoid startling the terrified animal and causing him further injury. He intentionally avoided sedating the cub. He wanted to establish even a fleeting moment of trust because he knew the next few critical days would be about building a bond. He managed to loosen and cut a section of the woven wire with the small, sharp blade of his pocket knife, bending the thick, painful thorns back just enough to create a small, viable opening. He kept talking softly, explaining his actions with a gentle voice, as if the cub could truly understand every word. "There you go, Leo. Just a little more. We're almost out. You're safe now." The cub hesitated for only a fraction of a second, staring with those wide, haunting eyes. Then, driven by pure instinct, the overwhelming need for warmth and absolute desperation, he lunged toward the freedom of the opening. John caught him instantly, gathering the small, trembling body and wrapping him securely in the thick, comforting lining of his jacket. The cub didn't fight, not even a weak struggle. He didn't even protest. The very moment he felt the sudden, blessed warmth and the gentle, firm pressure of human arms around him, his little body seemed to physically deflate. The relentless, piercing crying stopped instantly, replaced by a shuddering sigh and the faint, rapid, terrified thump of his heart against John's chest. Holding him close, John felt a profound, aching sorrow that brought a sudden sting to his own eyes. This baby, this tiny future king of the savannah, was nothing but a fragile, frightened bundle of fur and bone in his hands. The tears he had heard through the night were the sound of an entire, safe world, brutally ending for this one small, innocent creature. John stood up. The cub nestled safely inside his jacket, warm and surprisingly heavy in his arms. He swept his powerful flashlight beam one last time over the immediate area, searching meticulously for any sign of the mother, any clear tracks, any discarded clue. There was nothing left to find, just the deep, messy paw prints of the struggling cub and the undeniable cold evidence of human criminal intervention, the crude, cruel, man-made barrier. The walk back to the outpost felt longer, heavier, now burdened by responsibility. John was acutely aware of the precious, vulnerable life he held. The cub was completely silent now, but John could feel the tremors in his small body as they moved slowly through the darkness. The immediate physical danger of the night was suddenly replaced by the overwhelming long-term responsibility of what came next. This was no longer just a simple rescue, it was a deeply emotional commitment to rehabilitation and justice. The moon, finally rising into the sky, cast a pale, silvery glow over the landscape as John reached the safe, electrified perimeter of his outpost. He knew he had a long, sleepless night ahead of him. He needed to rehydrate the cub carefully, introduce a specialized milk substitute, and above all, keep him warm enough to survive the night. More urgently, he needed to start investigating the vile trap and the people who set it. Who would take a cub this young, and why would they abandon him? Was it poachers? Was it the abhorrent, illegal pet trade? He gently settled Leo into a makeshift nest of clean, soft towels inside a large plastic crate, tucked safely close to the radiating warmth of the kerosene lamp. The cub blinked slowly, his big blue-gray eyes fixed completely on John, a silent, profound question in their deep pupils. John dipped his finger into a small dish of water and offered it to the cub, who lapped weakly and tentatively. "You're a brave boy, Leo," John whispered, gently stroking the soft, spotted fur on his head. The cub instinctively leaned into the human touch, and a tiny, almost inaudible purr began in his chest, the very first sound of contentment and safety he had made all night. This incredible story of survival, courage, and rescue is only just beginning. The full, harrowing truth of what exactly happened to little Leo is a complex, heartbreaking mystery that we will unravel, piece by piece, as John dives deeper into the dark motives of the people who abandoned him. But before we dive deeper into the investigation, and before John starts preparing for the dangerous, necessary task of finding out who did this and why, we need to take a quick, important moment. If Leo's raw courage and John's immediate selfless action in the middle of the dark night have touched your heart as deeply as they have touched ours, please take a moment right now. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is absolutely vital. It helps us tell more of these critical, emotional stories, bringing much-needed light to the emotional depth, the incredible resilience, and the fragile lives of the animals that share our world. We have so much more of Leo's journey to share, and you will not want to miss what happens next as John begins to piece together the sinister puzzle of his abandonment. John watched the cub for a long, quiet time, the shadows playing across the small enclosure. The purr grew a little stronger, a steady vibration of life against the vast, oppressive silence of the night. He was still profoundly weak, exhausted and traumatized, but he was alive and he was safe, thanks only to the persistence of his tiny, desperate cry and the listening ears of a stranger in the vast African night. The immediate panic of the rescue was completely over, replaced by a grim, cold determination. John knew he had to protect this cub at all costs and expose the cruel people responsible for leaving him to a certain painful death. The drama of the human conflict had only just begun. The dark mystery of Leo's past was about to take John deep into the dangerous, unseen world of wildlife trafficking, far beyond the quiet, safe boundaries of his small research outpost. Every single detail, from the type of wire used in the trap to the exact location of the cruel cage, pointed undeniably toward a professional, heartless operation. The full, terrifying weight of the emotional and ethical challenge now settled firmly on John's tired shoulders, knowing he held the key to this innocent animal's future in his hands. He had promised the cub's safety when he held him, and he was absolutely determined to keep that promise, no matter the danger or the ultimate personal cost. The first light of dawn, soft and gold, was just beginning to spill across the savannah when John finally allowed himself to rest. He had spent the entire remainder of the night vigilantly watching over Leo. The cub, weak but finally warm and safe, had managed to drink a small, vital amount of rehydration fluid mixed with a specialized milk replacement formula, taking it down slowly from a bottle designed for orphaned wildlife. Every tiny swallow was a monumental victory against the overwhelming cold and the creeping specter of dehydration that had threatened to claim his life. John sat cross-legged near the crate, the gentle, rhythmic purr of the lion cub now the dominant sound in the otherwise quiet outpost. It was a fragile, small sound, almost lost beneath the sound of his own heavy, exhausted breathing, but it was pure music to John's ears. He was running entirely on adrenaline and the deep, profound satisfaction of knowing this small, precious life had been pulled back from the absolute brink. Watching the cub sleep peacefully, curled tightly into a ball of spotted fur, allowed John a rare, brief moment of pure relief, a temporary respite from the grim reality of the rescue. He recognized the depth of the trauma Leo had suffered, the separation from his mother, the agonizing, relentless cold of the night, the sheer panic of being trapped. All these terrifying experiences would leave deep emotional scars that would demand far more than just milk and warmth to heal. With the immediate threat to Leo's life stabilized for the moment, the cold, hard reality of the investigation started to demand John's attention. He knew he had a small window of opportunity. The people responsible for this cruelty would not have simply walked away. They would have left clues, and they might even return, intending to finish what they started or to find a different, more valuable target. The sun was now fully up, washing the outpost in bright, hot light, and John decided he needed to return to the trap site immediately before the heat and the wind erased the few subtle, crucial tracks that might remain. He made a quick, decisive call to his closest contact, a respected veteran wildlife ranger named Elias, who patrolled the southern sector of the park. Elias knew the dark underbelly of the trafficking world better than anyone. John's voice was low, tight, and urgent as he described the scene. The crude, cruel wire, the woven thorn barrier, and the absolute abandonment of the cub. Elias, this was professional, John explained into the old satellite phone, the static crackling slightly on the line. They used heavy-gauge fence wire, not just some loose snare. It was designed to keep something in, not just to catch it. They snatched a cub, and then for some reason, they left him to die in that little cage. Elias's reply was grim, confirming John's worst fears. Heavy-gauge wire? That sounds like the work of the Kifo group, John. They're moving away from rhino horn and focusing on the exotic pet trade now. They take the cubs, wait for a buyer, and abandon them if the rendezvous falls through or the pickup is delayed. They are ruthless. They don't care about the animals. They only care about the money. The news hit John with the force of a physical blow. The Kifo group was infamous. A large, well-organized syndicate known for its extreme violence and ruthlessness. Intervening here was not just about saving an animal. It was about stepping into a direct, deadly conflict with some of the most dangerous people operating in the entire region. The stakes, already high for Leo, were now dangerously personal for John. He left Leo safely tucked away, blocking the crate's entrance with heavy stones to ensure maximum protection, and drove his old, dusty Land Cruiser back toward the dry riverbed. The morning light transformed the scene from a terrifying shadow play to a place of stark, harsh clarity. The place where Leo had cried himself hoarse was exactly as John had left it. The tangle of wire and thorns, the small cramped hollow between the fig tree roots. He meticulously examined the area, centimeter by painstaking centimeter. The sun had already begun to bake the earth, making the tracks less distinct, but John's trained eye found them. He discovered three critical pieces of evidence. First, he found a discarded, half-empty can of a specific brand of canned meat, the kind favored by some of the more itinerant, unauthorized drilling crews that occasionally encroached on the park's periphery. The label was faded, but the unique shape of the can was enough to suggest an origin outside the typical hunter or local farmer. Second, far more definitive, were the vehicle tracks. Two distinct sets of tire impressions, larger and deeper than the worn tracks of John's own vehicle, led up to the site and then abruptly turned away. One set was from a heavy-duty pickup, the other, strangely, from a smaller, quicker vehicle, possibly a motorbike or a specialized quad bike used for fast, silent movement across rough terrain. The two sets of tracks told a clear story. A team was involved. They had driven in together, set the trap, and then left quickly. The third clue, which made John's breath catch in his throat, was not near the trap, but slightly off to the side, hidden beneath a tuft of dry yellow grass. It was a single tiny tuft of lion fur, slightly darker than Leo's own coat, caught on a sharp thorn. It was slightly thicker, coarser, undeniably the fur of a mature lioness. John knew instantly what this meant, and the realization was devastating. They hadn't just found Leo and taken him, they had almost certainly trapped or injured the mother, which was the only way they could have snatched a cub this young and left the area quickly without being immediately pursued. The cub's endless, heart-wrenching cry had been a call for a mother who was likely unable to answer, or worse. The truth was far more cruel than simple abandonment. It was a devastating act of family destruction. The traffickers hadn't just left Leo to die, They had ensured he was truly alone in the world. John carefully collected the piece of fur and the can, bagging them as evidence. The danger now wasn't just hypothetical. If the mother was injured or still alive and actively searching, the area was a ticking time bomb. If the Kifo group knew John had found the cub, he was instantly a major liability, a witness who could link them directly to a crime that carried severe penalties. He had to be cautious, methodical, and above all, fast. Back at the outpost, John checked on Leo, the fear and determination fighting a fierce battle in his chest. Leo was stirring now, his little head lifting slowly. He was still weak, still deeply fearful, but there was a flicker of emerging curiosity in his wide, blue-gray eyes. When John approached, the cub's fragile purr immediately returned, a clear, powerful sign of recognition and growing attachment. It was an attachment that John knew was both beautiful and terrifying. The cub, against all the laws of nature and survival, was starting to imprint on his rescuer. This fragile bond was the cub's lifeline, but it was also a chain binding John inexorably to the danger. He sat down next to the crate, letting Leo sniff the back of his hand, tentatively, his wet pink nose brushing lightly against John's skin. The purr escalated into a low, steady rumble, a sound of such simple, innocent trust that it nearly broke John's composure. This small creature, who had every reason to fear everything, was trusting him completely. John had spent his life studying the boundaries between human and animal, understanding where his role ended and nature's began. Now, those boundaries were utterly blurred. He wasn't just a conservationist, he was Leo's only chance, his protector, his surrogate pride. The feeling of this small, trusting life, depending entirely on his courage and his judgment, fueled a renewed, fierce determination. He pulled up the park's detailed satellite map on his worn laptop. He cross-referenced the area of the trap with the vehicle tracks and the known activity patterns of the Kifo group, using data provided by Elias and other unofficial sources. The location of the trap was not random. It was a perfect, secluded pinch point near a seasonal water source, a known migratory corridor for prey, and a frequent hunting ground for the lion pride. The traffickers knew the savannah better than most of the wardens. They were calculating, patient, and precise. John then focused his attention on the discarded canned meat. He pulled up a map of the nearest authorized industrial operations, a distant copper mine, and a much closer small-scale construction project currently building a new tourist lodge nearly 50 miles north. He knew the specific brand of meat was commonly used by the subcontractors on the tourist lodge project. It was a weak link, a subtle, tenuous thread, but it was the only lead he had, pointing toward a possible inside connection or temporary base of operations. The group had been working very close to a major construction zone. He realized the severity of the timeline. The longer he waited, the colder the trail became, and the more likely the Kifo group was to either return to the area to check for their capture or move on to a new area entirely. John had to act, not just to save Leo, but to prevent this same vile cycle of cruelty from repeating itself with another innocent, vulnerable animal. He began the grueling, difficult process of planning his next move. He couldn't go to the local authorities. They were understaffed, underfunded, and compromised by informants. He had to conduct this investigation mostly alone, relying solely on his instincts, the few connections he had, and the undeniable cold evidence he had gathered. He decided to drive north toward the construction site, under the guise of conducting routine ecological surveys, all while keeping a low profile and his true intentions hidden. The journey would be long and extremely dangerous, taking him further away from the safety of his research outpost and deep into potentially hostile territory, but he felt an absolute non-negotiable duty to the tiny creature curled in the crate beside him. His gaze returned to the cub. Leo was now resting his tiny head on one of John's worn, thick gloves, a surrogate comforter. John reached down gently and placed 2 fingers on the cub's back, feeling the slow, even pulse of his heart and the steady, rhythmic purr. This small act of connection, this profound moment of shared vulnerability, reinforced his resolve. Now, as John prepares to venture into the dangerous world of illegal trafficking, setting aside his life's work to protect the vulnerable life he rescued, we need to pause for the final time. We've seen the sheer determination of this man and the innocence of the small cub who cried all night until a stranger found him. The incredible, painful truth about Leo's mother, the capture and the family destruction, is only now becoming clear. If John's fierce, unwavering determination to protect this baby lion and the heartbreaking journey of little Leo have moved you, please make sure you are subscribed and that you have turned on notifications. This story is about to get even more tense and dramatically real as John confronts the dangers of the criminal syndicate responsible. Don't miss the moment when the investigation reveals the terrifying identities of the traffickers and the subsequent high-stakes effort to bring them to justice and ensure Leo's future. Your continued support allows us to tell these vital, emotional stories of rescue and resilience, shining a necessary light into the darkest corners of wildlife crime. John spent the rest of the morning prepping his vehicle, checking his gear, and ensuring Leo had enough formula and warmth to survive the journey, which would begin at dusk. He rigged a small, secure box on the passenger seat, lining it with blankets and securing the crate to ensure Leo remained safe and undisturbed during the bumpy, difficult journey. He carefully loaded the evidence he had collected, the can, the fur, the wire samples, knowing they might be the only things that stood between the traffickers and their continued freedom. The weight of the responsibility felt immense, but when Leo opened his eyes and gave a small, contented stretch, John felt the impossible, overwhelming reward of his duty. This cub, named Leo, represented a future worth fighting for, a symbol of everything pure and wild that John was dedicated to protecting. The next chapter was about action, danger, and the difficult pursuit of justice for the quiet tragedy that unfolded under the merciless, silent stars of the African night. The confrontation was coming, and John was ready to meet it, fueled by the tiny, purring heartbeat next to him. The shadows of the late afternoon stretched long and thin across the dust, marking the end of the day and the beginning of John's incredibly difficult, high-stakes mission. With Leo securely settled in his reinforced crate on the passenger seat, purring softly against the quiet rumble of the engine, John finally turned the key in the ignition. The old Land Cruiser groaned to life, kicking up a plume of orange dust, and began its slow, deliberate journey north toward the construction site, the thin, tenuous thread linking the innocent cub to the ruthless Kifo group. The drive was agonizingly slow and profoundly tense. Every mile John covered increased the distance from the safety of his familiar outpost and brought him closer to the unknown, calculated danger of the traffickers. He drove with a grim, focused precision, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, not just for the familiar signs of wildlife, but for any subtle, unnatural disturbance. A freshly broken branch, an unfamiliar vehicle track, the distant, suspicious flicker of an unauthorized campfire. The vast, open savanna, usually a place of profound peace for John, now felt like an enormous, menacing stage, ready for a dangerous confrontation. Leo, surprisingly, handled the journey with a fragile, trusting quietness. He was still desperately weak, but the rhythmic motion of the vehicle and the constant, close presence of John provided a powerful, stabilizing comfort. Every hour, John would pull over, offering the cub his specialized formula. He watched, with a profound, aching tenderness, as Leo's small, spotted body slowly began to fill out, the fearful tremors subsiding, replaced by the quiet, deep breaths of a creature finally daring to hope for survival. This small, precious life was the absolute reason for John's reckless courage. He was carrying the future of a king in a crate, and nothing would deter him. By the second day of travel, John reached the outer boundaries of the construction area. The contrast was utterly jarring. The wild, ancient beauty of the Serengeti abruptly ended, replaced by the harsh, mechanical scars of human industry, piles of dirt, rusting equipment, the loud, monotonous noise of heavy machinery. It was here, amidst the chaos of development, that the hidden cruelty of the Kifo group would be finally exposed. He drove past the main gate, offering a wave and a plausible excuse, a fictitious ecological survey of the temporary river flows near the site, to the indifferent, tired security guard. He continued deeper into the camp, looking for the specific recognizable clues, the large, heavy-duty pickup tracks matching those he had found at the riverbed trap site, and the specific, faded brand of canned meat he had bagged as evidence. He didn't have to search long. Near a cluster of temporary, dilapidated workers' barracks and a makeshift mechanics shed, he saw them. Two vehicles were parked side by side. A large, mud-caked pickup with tires matching the distinct, deep treads he'd photographed at the trap site, and, parked closely beside it, a nimble, all-terrain quad bike, perfect for rapid, silent dashes into the bush. The sight was a cold, hard confirmation of the evil he had only imagined. John, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs, drove past, parking his own vehicle a calculated, safe distance away. He quickly grabbed his satellite phone and sent a low-priority coded message to Elias, detailing his exact location and the vehicles he had identified, careful not to trigger any immediate, noisy response that might alert the criminals. He knew he needed hard evidence of their vile operation, something more substantial than just a parked truck, before Elias could safely bring in the professional authorities. Under the guise of setting up a fake wildlife camera to monitor local bird activity, John slowly, deliberately began his reconnaissance of the barracks area. He moved with the quiet grace of a man who had spent decades blending into the landscape, using the harsh shadows and the loud, distracting sounds of the construction work as a perfect shield. The air around the barracks was thick with the scent of cheap fuel, burnt oil, and the lingering metallic smell of old meat. He passed the back of the mechanic's shed and saw, discarded in a greasy pile, dozens of the same distinct empty cans, the proof he needed. But the final, most important piece of the heartbreaking puzzle was just a few feet away, hidden behind a stack of unused tires. It was a small, crudely built wooden kennel covered with a heavy torn tarp. A deep, unsettling fear mixed with a burning, righteous anger tightened John's stomach. He waited until the noise of a passing bulldozer completely covered any sound he might make, and he carefully approached the structure. He lifted the tarp with extreme, slow caution. Inside the small, dark enclosure was not a cub, but something far more heartbreaking and sickening, a collection of makeshift cages, clearly designed for transporting small animals, stained with mud and filth, and containing discarded tiny bones. But one small, sturdy cage still held something alive. Crouched inside, terribly injured and heavily sedated, was a tiny female leopard cub, barely older than Leo, chained to the side of the wooden cage. She was utterly silent, her eyes glazed over with fear and the lingering effects of the drug, her breathing shallow and desperately strained. The Kifo group wasn't just targeting lions, they were snatching any vulnerable, valuable baby animal they could find for the exotic pet trade. This was the scale of their cold, calculated cruelty, a continuous operation of theft and family destruction. John's first, immediate instinct was to smash the lock, to free the tiny, suffering creature. But he controlled himself, forcing his hands to remain steady. He knew this was the vital, undeniable evidence that would bring down the entire operation. He quickly snapped multiple close-up photographs of the leopard cub, the cages, and the distinct branded padlock securing the poor animal. He worked with speed, his adrenaline surging, knowing his time was running out, that every second he spent here put his life and Leo's in even greater danger. He sent a second, urgent, now classified message to Elias. Confirmed operation. Leopard cub located, sedated, still in possession. 2 confirmed vehicles. Need immediate extraction team now. This is a secure location. D. As John retreated, moving silently back toward the safety of his vehicle, his mission instantly changed from mere investigation to a desperate 2-front rescue. He couldn't leave the leopard cub. He could not, under any circumstances, allow this animal to be shipped away into a dark, painful destiny. He reached his Land Cruiser, his breath catching painfully in his lungs. He was ready to wait for Elias to arrive with the necessary professional backup and the police. But just as he put his hand on the door handle, he heard the loud, unmistakable sound of a vehicle engine turning over nearby. 2 men, large and heavily built, emerged from the barracks, walking quickly toward the parked pickup. One of them was carrying a large, locked travel crate. They were clearly preparing for a shipment or a quick escape. John froze, sinking instantly to the ground behind his vehicle's heavy tires, pulling his body into the smallest, most invisible shape possible. He held his breath, praying that the cub, Leo, nestled in the crate, would remain utterly silent. The 2 men were now closer, talking in gruff, hurried whispers, too far away for John to clearly hear the details, but their tone was heavy with urgency and palpable nervousness. One of the men suddenly stopped, turning his head sharply, his eyes sweeping across the area, a sudden cold suspicion crossing his face. He hadn't seen John, but the unnatural quietness of John's parked vehicle, or perhaps some instinctive 6th sense, had triggered an immediate alarm. "Check that truck," the man said, his voice hard, low and unmistakable, pointing directly toward John's Land Cruiser. "That doesn't look like one of the contractor's vehicles." John knew with a sudden chilling certainty that he had no more than 30 seconds. He couldn't wait for Elias. The traffickers would check his vehicle, find the evidence, find Leo, and the rescue attempt would end in absolute tragedy for everyone involved. He had to create an immediate, total distraction, a sudden, blinding diversion that would buy him enough crucial time to make a move. He acted on pure, desperate instinct. Reaching into the open window of his Land Cruiser, John quickly grabbed the heavy-duty length of rope he had brought along for the emergency night expedition back on day 1. With a sudden, forceful pull, he intentionally snapped a loose, rusty section of temporary fence post that was holding up a coil of heavy, old wire near the shed. The metal post crashed loudly against a stack of empty oil drums, creating an ear-shattering metallic clang that sliced through the construction noise like a sudden thunderclap. The 2 traffickers instantly whirled around, startled by the unexpected, aggressive sound. They shouted at each other, their attention completely diverted from John's truck toward the sudden, terrifying sound of what they clearly perceived to be an immediate, unexpected intrusion. This was John's crucial window. He moved with a practiced, desperate urgency, sprinting toward the leopard cub's cage, using the oil drums as temporary cover. The traffickers, distracted and now moving toward the source of the crash, gave John the priceless few seconds he needed. He reached the cage, pulled a heavy set of bolt cutters from his tool pouch, and with 2 sharp, violent, loud snaps, he severed the chain and the padlock, holding the tiny, trembling leopard cub captive. He scooped the cub up gently, wrapping her immediately in his jacket, just as he had done with Leo. The leopard cub, half-drugged and terrified, offered no resistance, simply collapsing into the safety of his arms, her shallow breathing barely perceptible. The traffickers were now much closer, their shouts becoming focused and dangerous. "There, behind the shed! Get him!" John raced back toward his Land Cruiser, the 2 cubs, the lion and the leopard, a heart-breakingly precious cargo, clutched close to his chest. He managed to throw open the passenger door, gently depositing the leopard cub next to Leo's crate. Slamming the door shut, He vaulted into the driver's seat, his hand shaking, but his mind cold and clear. He started the engine, shifting immediately into reverse, and slammed his foot down hard on the accelerator. The vehicle roared backward, kicking up a massive, blinding cloud of thick orange construction dust. He heard the sharp, unmistakable sound of a rifle shot, not aimed to kill but to disable, the bullet striking the rear fender with a loud, sickening thunk. But the dust cloud was his most powerful ally. John spun the steering wheel, throwing the Land Cruiser into a fast, violent U-turn, heading straight toward the open, desolate savannah, leaving the confusion, the chaos, and the dangerous, enraged traffickers behind him in the swirling cloud of red dust. He drove for 45 minutes, hard and fast, until the construction noise and the lingering threat of pursuit were completely gone. He finally stopped in a secluded, overgrown thicket, pulled out his satellite phone, and sent a final, crucial message to Elias. Secured both cubs. Evasive action successful. Location, coordinates are deliberately omitted for safety. Moving south. They are armed and violent. Advise immediate raid on site now. The next few hours were spent in a state of high tension and exhaustion, but with a profound, quiet sense of victory. John tended to the two small, frightened animals. Leo, sensing the presence of another, equally vulnerable creature, stretched his neck out from the crate and offered a soft, comforting purr, a tiny king welcoming a terrified subject into his protection. The leopard cub, whom John quickly named Luna, began to stir, her golden eyes blinking slowly, cautiously. Days later, after a successful, quiet rendezvous with Elias and a small, trusted team of anti-poaching specialists who had successfully raided the site and arrested the key members of the Kifo group, John returned to his outpost. The long journey was over. Justice had been swiftly and unexpectedly served, thanks entirely to the trail of breadcrumbs left by the traffickers and the persistent courage of one man. Leo and Luna were now under the professional, expert care of a specialist wildlife rehabilitation center, far from the dangers of the savannah. The center's mission was clear and critical: to fully prepare both cubs for an eventual, successful return to the wild. They were housed together, quickly forming a unique, profound bond. Two orphan survivors of human cruelty, their shared trauma forming an unbreakable foundation of trust and reliance. Leo's deep, booming purr now comforted Luna's trembling fears, a true testament to the healing power of kinship. John's own future was changed forever. He returned to his research, but he was no longer just a scientist. He was a protector, a witness, and a crucial voice against the darkness of wildlife crime. His incredible story, the cry in the night, the sinister trap, the discovery of the mother's fate, the dangerous confrontation, and the successful simultaneous rescue of both a lion and a leopard cub, became a powerful beacon, shining a bright, necessary light on the fragile lives of these magnificent animals. As for Leo, the baby lion who cried through the night until a stranger listened, he grew stronger every single day. His fear slowly gave way to the innate, playful curiosity of a young lion. His blue-gray baby eyes eventually transitioned to the fierce, steady amber of a true predator. He would never forget the human who saved him, the voice that offered comfort in the darkness. But his destiny was not with John. It was waiting for him, vast and powerful, in the silent golden heart of the Serengeti. And when the time finally came for Leo and Luna to be released back into a safe, vast reserve, they walked away together, two powerful, beautiful symbols of resilience and hope, proving that even the most terrifying and heartbreaking darkness can be overcome by the simplest, yet most profound act of human compassion and the endless, beautiful trust of a small, innocent animal.